Call to order the November 3rd, 2011 Oklahoma City Board of Adjustment meeting. Remind you to turn off your cell phones if you have not done that at this point. We have a new board member. Mr. Bernard Jones is the newest member of the Board of Adjustment, and we welcome you and look forward to serving with you today. I would entertain a motion to receive the minutes of the October 20th, 2011 meeting.
So moved.
Second. Motion and a second. Please vote. Minutes are approved. Do we have continuous requests or withdrawals?
We have none today.
Do we have any continuous requests or withdrawals from the public? Hearing none, would you proceed with the first case, please?
Item number 1, case number 13471 through 13478, request of use variance of New Dominion LLC for permit to drill 8 oil gas wells located at 14900, 14902, 14908, 14910, 14912, 14914, 14920, and 14924 Northeast 150th Street.
Mr. Chairman, members of the board, my name is Dennis Box, and I'm here with Jerry Bro. These are wells that will be on the shallow side, approximately 5,000 feet. The deeper side, about 5,500 feet deep. We will have one pad site. If you've had an opportunity to drive out there, it is rural in nature, and our pad site, as you note, comes off of 150th Street and comes off Choctaw Road, so we'll be able to keep some of the trees and brush that exist at both locations. And we are attempting to both hit the Hutton and the Cleveland. The Hutton is 5,600 feet and the Cleveland is 5,000 feet. So when you look at that map, the first wells that will be drilled are 75 and 76, and from there, depending on what we find, we'll probably skid the rigs over and go to the west, and then back to the east, and then finish up at the west. So we're here to answer any questions if you have any, and Jerry's here on behalf of the company. These are deviated holes that will go into different quarter sections.
Questions or comments from the board?
Make a motion to approve. Second.
With a motion and a second, register your vote. You are approved.
Thank you very much.
Item number 2, case number 13470, request of Sacred Heart Catholic Parish for a variance to permit a library building to be located closer than 20 feet to a lot line abutting a residential use located at 615 Southwest 27th Street.
If you would state your name and address for the record, please.
My name is John Evans. I'm with Nasher Constructors at 5929 North May Avenue. We're here representing the owner for the Sacred Heart Catholic Church and School.
Before we proceed, John and I have interacted on some business before, and so I'm going to recuse myself at this point.
Proceed with your presentation, please.
Thank you. Members of the committee, we are requesting a variance for the 20-foot buffer zone between church property and the adjoining residential construction area due to the hardship for the church. This is an existing previous residential building located on their property that is now vacant. They would like to utilize this for a library for both the church and the school. It is not a new purchase. It's something that's been in their possession for over 10 years. And they would just like to make the use of it because they have run out of room within the school and they need to expand their library to accommodate more books. And there's only 10 feet between the existing house that it was under the previous zoning, which met the requirements, but now with the church wanting to use it, the zoning buffer is required to be wider.
And I take it you're aware of no opposition, any other residential neighbors in and around the church that are complaining or oppose this?
We're aware of no opposition. I know the adjoining neighbor. I've spoken to him personally, and they're fine with it. And as far as I know, there was no objections registered from any of them.
And I don't think there's any opposition here today. Any questions?
Make a motion to approve.
Second. There's been a motion and a second. All those in favor, please vote.
Thank you.
Thank you.
Item number 3, case number 13479, request of Rest Haven Cemetery for a variance to permit a 5-foot-tall front yard fence with masonry columns located at 500 Southwest 104th Street.
Would the applicant come forward? Has he just stepped outside the... If you would, your name and address for the record.
Scott Duncan for Rest Haven Cemetery, 500 Southwest 104th.
And go ahead and speak to your application.
All right, we're just asking for a variance for a fence with rock columns. It's a 5-foot fence. It will be done where you see the X's on the perimeter line from western, south, it's by the little Jewish cemetery. It's not listed, but it's a project that's going to take probably...
Well, one thing I noticed when I read your application is, as you were making the case for security and having the 5-foot fence, you don't need a variance to do that.
Okay. Yeah, it's basically for vandalism. You know, it would stop vandalism plus beautify the cemetery surrounding.
You're allowed to do that. What you do need a variance for is the brick columns.
Okay.
But you just said stone columns. What do you
Well,
intend?
it's like a brick, but it looks like a block. You know, it kind of looks like a rock. Yeah, just like this right here.
Now, if you were going to build a 5-foot fence without those brick columns, you wouldn't need to be here. Is there a reason that you've incorporated? I mean, did you have somebody design this around those brick columns, or?
We just want the brick columns just for the beautification of them, the way they look. There'll be one brick column, a rock column. Then there'll probably be 5 panels, wrought iron panels, then another column.
So what would the spacing be between your brick columns?
Probably around 40-something feet right there.
And this site plan represents the number of columns that would be,
Right,
and represented by that 40-foot spacing?
right. And the fence panels will give the families the opportunity to purchase a panel and have their name on it.
I think one thing we would want to consider is, I mean, as we, look at this application, is we would want to make sure that we understood, where those brick columns were going to place, what the spacing would be. What other things, staff, should we consider in this application? What about the height of the columns? I don't see any place in here what the height of those
Be
columns.
5,
How much?
same as a fence, 5.
Same as the fence? Okay.
Uh-huh.
It looks like in the drawing that's been, the Tuscan with the keystone cap, that the top of the column with the cap on it would be just over
Yeah.
the height of the fence. Okay. Is that representative of the fence style too?
Pardon?
Do you have a copy of the packet that was prepared for this?
No. Yes,
It's the one that's got the cloud around it. Is that what your fencing, your metal fencing will look like?
right, exactly.
And that's what your brick columns will look like?
I can't tell if it's brick or block. Yeah, it's a chop block, which is reminiscent of about the same size as brick, yes.
Who's your contractor?
Wendell Snow.
Are they a fence contractor or a
He's
general
just going to
contractor?
come in, and he's just a guy that we know through the cemetery who's just going to lay the brick column up.
And then is he going to install the rest of the fencing?
We will put the wrought iron fence up.
Okay, he would
as
set
needed.
the columns and you would do the
Right,
rest.
right. If I set the columns, it'd fall down.
Other board members?
Are we okay on the site distance at 104th and Western?
The fence drawn on the exhibit is just for reference. They'll have to meet the site triangle requirement to get a permit.
Okay, so any place that there is an entrance, they will have to have a site distance?
They will have to have a site distance.
Okay.
I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
I'll second.
Before we take that vote, do we need to specify distance between columns, or is all that going to be taken care of in terms of when they pull a permit for the...
If it's not in the board order, it will be just at their discretion on the spacing. You have a
Before we vote on that,
spacing
I would
plan?
prefer that our order was more specific in terms of the spacing of those columns. I would
40
entertain
feet adequate?
Yeah, it's 40 feet, maybe a few inches, something like that, yeah.
So amend the motion to make it 40 feet plus?
Yes,
plus or minus with...
with just specificity, so that he knows in the order what he's being allowed to.
Right. I'd amend my motion.
And column height not to exceed...
5 feet.
Or a nominal 5 feet.
Right.
And the second, you agree to the amendment?
The actual size, is that important?
2 by 2, the columns?
2 by 2s?
And
Okay.
it will need to be, they've submitted this as their exhibit that it will look like, so when we get a permit, this will
Pretty
be
close
part
to
of-
that.
Exhibit
Okay.
will be part of the board order.
He said 2 by 2 would be fine, so.
So Mark, you want to revise your...
Amend my motion again to include the 2 by 2 provision.
An overall height of plus or minus...
5 feet.
A nominal 5 feet, and spacing is a nominal 40 feet. We have a
I'll
motion.
second that.
Thank you. We have a motion and a second. Please register your vote. You're approved, sir.
Thank you.
Item number 4, case number 13480, request of Genghis Grill for a variance to permit accessory attached signs exceeding the maximum allowed size located at 2121 West Memorial.
Is the applicant here, or a representative of the applicant? No? Case number 5, please. Do we need a motion to do this, or can we just set it aside and move to
You
the end
can
of the
set
meeting?
it aside and
Okay.
come back.
Item number
Just move
5.
it to the hill, or,
Just set it aside for
okay.
Item number 5, case number 13481, request of the City of Oklahoma City for a variance to permit a fence exceeding the maximum 8-foot height requirement in the side and rear yard located at 9600 North Oklahoma Avenue.
Mr. Chairman, board members, my name is Wayne Corville. I'm an employee of the City of Oklahoma, representing the Public Works Department on this issue. This variance is in relationship to the NBA practice facility for the Thunder basketball team. As part of the facility, the back portion of this facility, which the fence is going to be around, is in the future going to be an outside exercise area as part of the facility as a whole. It will house a practice field, a sand pit, and a running hill that would accommodate outdoor work activities. It's very important for the Thunder as a team to have security for this area, and that is the purpose that we're trying to keep the fence within the aesthetics of the building, but yet also providing security. And part of that, there's some detention ponds there that create a challenge for us in relationship to you as far as the 8-foot requirement. The only areas predominantly that the fence is above that is in those areas, and again, that is in relationship to the security of the facility. Also, keeping the line level across the side as it drops is important to the team as far as aesthetics of the building, how the window lines and the brick lines work out.
And I think we'd all agree that that would look much better rather than a fence that followed the terrain. Any discussion or comments from the board?
As long as Kevin Durant's not playing flag football, I think we'll be fine with that. I'd make a motion to approve the variance.
Second. Motion and a second. Register your vote. Approved. Thank you.
Item number 6, case number 13244, request of Doug Friesen for extension of the time period approved for completion pursuant to an order of the board located at 524 Northwest 17th Street.
Doug Friesen, 1309 North Chartel, representing Burton, Berry, and Bourbon.
Why don't we start off and address, you've had contractors working at the house, and let's address that part of today's business. Then let Catherine Montgomery, if she's in attendance, go ahead and address HP meeting and the findings from that meeting.
All of the work that that the Board of Adjustment kept has been completed. Yesterday, the Historical Preservation Commission met in reference to the items that were sent to them for review. A few of them were approved. The majority of those were denied. But all of the work that you did not send back has been approved, has been finished.
All right. If it's okay, let me excuse you and ask Catherine if she's ready to make her presentation.
These all go together. I just didn't have a chance to finish cooling. While the rest of that is being passed out, Catherine Montgomery, Historic Preservation Architect for the City of Oklahoma City. Let me just go through the attachments that I brought with me today. Starting from the back of the paperclip section, I printed out the photos from August 4th, which is when we began this effort, and the photographs from this morning, kind of show the progress over the past couple of months. Then the first stapled page from the back are the attachments that were included with the staff report at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting yesterday, minus the photographs because I didn't want to duplicate that. Although they didn't have the benefit of the photographs today, their photographs were from October 18th. And then the next stapled item is the staff report for the Historic Preservation Commission yesterday. The two pieces of paper that were handed out by Kathy Kasula include an update to the memo that was written to the board a couple of months ago, and the items that have been crossed out are the items that appear to be mostly complete. Then the other item is the minutes in the draft form of the proceedings yesterday at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting. I think the thing that you're probably most interested in at this time are the proceedings at the Historic Preservation Commission meeting yesterday. As you can see, they were asked to provide a recommendation to the Board of Adjustment regarding certain items used in the construction of a rear addition and their conformance with the guidelines and standards. We tried to use the word consistent with the guidelines and standards consistently yesterday. So the minutes have not been approved by the Commission, which they will be next month, but this is what we recorded from that meeting. You can see that the same item numbers on the minutes correspond to the item numbers in the staff report. So item 1A regarding the window air conditioner, that was recommended to the board to be permitted on a temporary basis for about another 4 months, which is what Mr. Friesen said that it would probably be required. Item B regarding the trim around a pair of the windows that are on the top north end of the addition on the west side. The commission found the trim around the windows to be consistent with the guidelines and recommends that to the Board of Adjustment. Regarding the smaller windows that were placed on the south end of the west side of the addition, the commission found that the windows do not relate to other windows in the house and that it simply appears as a smaller version of the historic windows and doesn't articulate as a smaller window should. And the commission does not recommend that item.
And you're referring to item 1C there?
Correct.
So just to recap real quick, the window air conditioner is not our issue, or there's a time frame that's been agreed on. 1B recommended that it's okay. Okay. Pardon me.
1C is not recommended. 1D and 1E were kind of considered together. They're both vents that weren't shown on the drawings. And although the design guidelines don't specifically address these kinds of vents in walls, the commission found that it was consistent as long as it got painted the same color as the adjacent wall and recommends that to the Board of Adjustment. The item F, which is the crawl space access door, again, the guidelines and standards don't specifically address crawl space access doors unless they're historic, and the commission found those to be consistent with the guidelines and recommend that to the Board of Adjustment. Item 2A is the ribbon or band of windows on the second floor on the south elevation. The recommendation to the Board of Adjustment is that it is inconsistent with the guidelines and the standards for the same reason that the smaller unit on the other side was. In addition to that, that is for the same reasons as 1C was not recommended. Then 2B, which has to do with the trim around the windows, again, they found that to be consistent and recommend that to the board. Regarding item 2C, which has to do with the door, it didn't seem that they really minded that it was wider. Their biggest issue was that the door and the side light have an arched top, and there aren't any other openings on the historic building that have arched tops. So they found that inconsistent with the guidelines and do not recommend that to the board. On item 2D, which has to do with the divided lights that were placed in the large window that's kind of in the middle of the south elevation, they do not recommend that to the board because they found that the divided lights were inconsistent with other windows on the house. Item 3A was recommended to the Board of Adjustment because it was a pair of windows that didn't get installed, and there's nothing in the guidelines that say you have to install a window in a certain location. So they recommend that to the board as being consistent with the guidelines. And then item 3B, which has to do again with one of the windows that has been made smaller, they found that inconsistent with the guidelines for the same reasons.
So 3B would be not recommended.
Correct. Okay. And then the last item that was on our list and is not recommended to the board, which are the two, what I'm calling picture windows that have artificial muntins or applied muntins, and the commission found that those applied muntins were inconsistent with the guidelines.
So that would be a no.
That's correct.
Could I ask you just to stay there, Mr. Friesen? Would you come forward? And is Catherine's report consistent with what you heard and observed yesterday at the HP meeting? Any disagreement?
Was her report consistent with what I heard?
Yes.
Absolutely.
Okay, okay. And if I could excuse you, Mr. Dell, invite you to come forward. You were at the meeting yesterday, and are these Observations consistent with what you heard.
I'm Brian Dell, 528 Northwest 17th Street, adjacent west of the property, subject there. What Mr. Friesen reported and what Ms. Montgomery reported is consistent with what the Historical Preservation Commission did yesterday. I would advise the board that they spent 2 hours from 6 o'clock until 8 o'clock last night covering this one case and went through it in detail and looked at every one of these particular items, especially with regard to the windows and the sizes, and found them all to be inconsistent. With regard to the board will allow me, I do note that there was, in this list of things that were done or remained unfinished that were stricken out, that some of the items that are there, while having been done, I would suggest, and I don't know where I put my papers anymore. There we go. I may circulate this with the board. I just took these pictures at noon today, and while many of the things have been done with regard to the addition, and no one is more anxious to see it completed than we are, my wife and I, that some of the things still remain to be inconsistent with historical guidelines, in particular the roof brackets. I've given you photographs of those. They could be, the ones that were put up could be easily made by the addition of a board on either side.
Let me ask this question. Is that within the scope of what we're considering or outside the scope?
It's within the scope if it's on the original memo from Catherine Montgomery of things that were not completed.
Because if it's not a part of what we have, jurisdiction and oversight, then it's an issue, to be taken up somewhere else.
I'm sorry, I got a ear infection in one ear, and my hearing aid is not working in the other.
Just wait just a moment. Catherine, could you?
It's right here. He's talking about roof brackets. It has not been certified, so it remains.
Okay, and Mr. Friesen is indicating that everything's been finished, so we'll address it. Pardon me. Go ahead.
The roof brackets, as they're described in here, are a triangular-shaped thing on the side that we can see from our side. They're essentially decorative, although the original ones were hollow, but it's been put up. They've been 4x4s instead of something that's 6 inches in diameter. And as I say, that these 4x4s, which are solid, could easily be made to duplicate the original simply by adding a board on each side to make them look exactly the same. And it would be historically accurate. And so that type of thing is something that remains to be inconsistent. I can see that because of the number of things, though, that the Historical Preservation Commission yesterday found to be inadequate, that we're going to be coming back on this for a while.
Could I invite Mr. Friesen back? Would you address these roof brackets?
I'm sorry?
I want to invite Mr. Friesen to come back, please. The roof brackets.
I believe that the roof brackets can be, if that is an issue, if the particular size is an issue, I think the only thing that they need would be a wrapping of a 1x around the entire side, around all the various legs to bring them so they look exactly like the other ones on the outside. They're a lot different on the inside because the other ones were hollow and these are actually weight supporting. But I think the only thing that would have to be done there would be to wrap them.
Do you agree with that, Catherine?
What I think should happen is that the brackets that are being reinstalled on the parts of the house, the historic parts of the house, should definitely match what they're replacing, that they should be exactly the same. For the addition, and in fact, the guidelines specify that new construction should be compatible yet differentiated. So, there will be two schools of thought. One is that differentiation should be clearly visible, and the other school of thought is that no, it shouldn't. They should be looking exactly the same. My preference is for it to be differentiated. Others hold a preference for having it be exactly the same. The drawings that were provided were not really specific in that regard.
Can you take care of that?
Yeah, but I don't know what I've been told to do.
Catherine, let's make it clear what we're asking Mr. Friesen to do.
Do you want me to wrap the ones that are replacing the original, what I heard her say is that her preference would be that we wrap the ones that are replacing the original, but on the ones that are on the addition, leave them as they are, is what I heard. I can certainly take care of that if that is this body's wish.
Is that your recommendation to us?
That would be my preference if I were a Historic Preservation Commissioner.
Is that a resolution that's acceptable to you?
Absolutely.
Okay. Then I think we can consider that, done. Do we need to receive HP's recommendations to us formally, or?
Yes, they should be received.
Let's go ahead and do that at this point, and then we'll talk about what we do about their recommendations. I would entertain a motion to accept the findings of the HP Commission at their November 2nd meeting.
So moved. Second.
Please register your vote. Those recommendations are received. Now then, in terms of HP's recommendations for the items that they are recommending that there still be, work, let's go through and we'll talk about them individually and see what we can do about those. First one I've got on my list is item 1C. And Catherine, if you could help explain what it would take to bring those into conformance for Mr. Friesen.
Based on the Historic Preservation Commission's recommendations, the articulation of those windows would need to be different. They didn't seem to mind that it was a smaller size, only that the size was just a miniaturized version of other pairs of windows on the house, and that if these windows truly serve a bathroom, as they do, that they would be articulated differently, even historically. So without drawing something out or, seeing some product materials, I don't know exactly what would need to happen, only that the windows they found unacceptable.
I guess, my question for all these items that we want to talk about where HP is recommending that we not accept them is how do we get from where we are? If he agrees that he wants to bring the house into compliance, how do we best communicate that so that the work gets done and to avoid confusion on that respect?
The statement that the Commission was consistently reminded of yesterday was in the staff report, and it says the guidelines and standards do not specifically, no wait, sorry. The guidelines and standards do not require windows to be of a certain size in an addition, except that they are to match or complement the proportion, shape, pattern, size, details, and profile of the windows in the historic building. At the onset of all of these items, staff's recommendation was that all of the items would be found consistent, and that the two windows that were picture windows with the fake buntons would be found inconsistent and would require some resolution.
But in terms of working out the details of what needs to be done, is it easier for Mr. Friesen to work directly with you or somebody else at the city, or what's the best way to proceed in terms of going ahead? Because I'm feeling he's got a willingness to work these things through, but I don't think this is the place for us to hash out the detail of what those should be. It's just who needs to work together so that we can begin to pull this together and
Well, having had the Historic Preservation Commission weigh in on it, I would feel most comfortable with it going to that body. I would be willing to work with him, but again, those would be staff's opinions and not necessarily the commission's. And while we agree on a lot of things, we don't agree on everything.
So it might be that it goes back to HP with the boards, that we have accepted their recommendations, and for the items where there's still work to be done, that they work out the detail of what revision or what needs to occur to bring that into compliance.
That would be my recommendation.
Okay. Agreeable?
Certainly, I mean, it's not like it much matters.
Other board members, do you understand that? I think, we're not in a position to articulate, whether certain things are in conformance or not.
Well, there's 6 things on here where it says do not recommend HP's findings. And I think what you're suggesting, Jeff, is that they go back with HP and work out resolutions as to these 6 items. And I guess the question I'd have of you, as Mr. Friesen, as far as the 6 items are concerned, are you agreeable to work with HP and resolve these issues in a timely fashion?
And let me answer that 2 different ways, because I came away from last night's meeting very frustrated. One of the questions that I asked the HP was, because it consistently they were talking about that these are miniature versions of the other windows. And they're functioning windows, they're wood windows, double hung, the small ones. And I said, my question was, I guess I'm a little bit confused, are you saying that if these were non-functioning windows but just a window, that would be acceptable? And I didn't get a response. I also inquired about whether they would want them to be longer in depth, and I didn't get a response. So I came away without having a clue. In response to your specific question, if there is a solution that can be obtained without rebuilding the entire house, absolutely. I mean, because I want to get this over with as much as anybody else. Sure. I just don't want to be seen giving you a blanket, yes, I'll do whatever they tell me to do, and then they come back and say you can rebuild the every window that we don't like you can take out and put something brand new back in, and it's going to take you tearing down the entire house. At that point, I probably would have an objection to it.
Understand.
I think this is what, if it is remanded back to HP Commission, then those sort of questions and that sort of detail can be dealt with, and then, and so that would be my inclination, is to see the items that do not recommend be remanded back to HP.
But can we continue this proceeding for a period of time so Mr. Friesen can come back to us and let us know about if you're having a problem, if there's a failure to communicate, we can assist in that line of communication in some form or fashion?
You could certainly do that. I'd recommend just to allow staff an opportunity to work with Mr. Friesen about what's expected, that you continue it to a date certain, the end of December. You have not yet accepted and recommended your schedule for next year. So all that's official are meetings through the end of this year. So you could continue it to the end of this year, and then if it wasn't time, continue it, because today you have on your agenda to approve your next year's schedule.
So when is our last meeting in December?
Oh, you know what? I just saw that you're on the schedule through February 16th, 2012. So I recommend that you continue it to a date in January to see exactly where you are in the process at that time. By then,
Be the 19th.
January 19th would be a good time to see what action has occurred and whether you can hear it again at that point, or if you need to continue it once again. Staff will need to get cut sheets and drawings from Mr. Friesen and have an opportunity to review those and make a report to the commission for their review. So, Catherine, does that sound about right to you, January 19th? HB Commission meets the first Wednesday of every month. So we likely would not be able to hear it in December, or perhaps the first meeting in January. And that would be consistent with the schedule we had.
5th.
And that much time would allow you to go ahead and take care of those roof rafters in compliance with what Catherine is addressed. You agreeable to that?
Yes, sir.
Okay. And Mr. Dell, I believe, would like to address it.
Maybe just one observation. One of the things that the Historical Preservation Commission considered last night was, in their 2-hour-long discussion of this, is they looked at two things. One is that they looked at the photographs of the windows that have been put in place, and then they looked at the drawings that had been submitted originally during the application for the CA. What they noticed was, among other things, was that these drawings were presented and drawn in December of 2005. What I hear being asked of the Commission here today, as well as the Historical Preservation Commission, is to approve what is there, which we've been doing and going through for now over 6 years, rather than complying with the original CA or complying with the drawings. If the applicant were to comply with the drawings that he submitted in 2005, we wouldn't have this ongoing dispute and continues on. As Mr. Baker noted the last time that we were here, he's been on the board for 11 years and never seen anything like this, and I would have to sort of agree, because the solution, to me at least, seems rather simple. If you submit a drawing and you come reasonably close to it, that would have ended this dispute. But as the board noted, the Commission noted last night, the windows that were put in, instead of being even close to the size of the drawings, were half the size in height of the ones that were there, as well as the ones that were on the drawing. So I'd ask the Commission to remember that when we come back on this in January, that the compliance of this would have been simple. Do what you said you were going to do. And we wouldn't have been here so many times taking up your time. Thank you.
I'd make a motion that this matter be continued to our January 9th, 2012 meeting, January 19th. But we want to do it after the historical preservation meeting, so, okay.
19th would give staff a chance to prepare a report for you all.
I'd make a motion that we move this to our meeting on January the 19th, 2012, and that the do not recommend recommendations of the Historical Preservation Commission, those matters be sent back to them for further review and consultation with staff.
And I think we want to add the substatement regarding the roof rafters that need to be addressed.
That's a good point. I'd add that to the motion.
I'll second.
Have a motion and a second. Register your vote. Continue to January the 19th.
Let me ask a question. I'm confused in this whole thing, and it doesn't, more to the staff than anybody else. How did we get here, and how do we keep from getting here again? I'm confused. You know, this thing's been going on for 6 or 7 years. I don't understand why it got up so far out of hand.
There are, I've been with the city almost 3 years, and one of the things that became apparent when I first started was that there were some things that remained outstanding, and while they were going to be inconvenient, there were things that needed to be resolved. For example, I mean, you can't just have somebody be in noncompliance for forever, and those things need to be resolved so that those properties can be cleared. So this is one of the ones that needed to be resolved. And the way to resolve it was just to dig in, have the homeowner apply for a C of A and go through the process of getting denied and then wherever they wanted to go with that from there. So I think that's how we're here, is that these are just one of the things that has just been around for a long time, and we're actually bringing it forward and trying to see it through.
So can we cure that?
For the future?
Yes.
It would be really nice if people just wouldn't do anything without a C of A. And I think that the most difficult cases that we have are the ones where that happens.
Did we not have anybody policing this and doing the inspections and during the construction process to see that the windows was put in there properly and so on? Do we have somebody that actually does that, such as a building inspector or so?
We do now. It's a new process that we began about 6 months ago, where we're actually adopting a closeout process. All the certificates of appropriateness that are expiring, a postcard is sent to the property owner to let them know that their CA is expiring, and if they aren't finished, they need to renew. That will give an opportunity for review to make sure they're doing it right. And then if they don't come back, or if they do, and then that CA expires, at the time they no longer have an active CA, development services in their building code permitting, code enforcement, with just the same people that do finals on building inspections, those kinds of people will be going out, and they are now going out and checking to see that the work has been done in accordance with the certificate of appropriateness. So we're starting that process, and it's starting to work. Some people are applying for extensions when maybe they wouldn't have before, and we're also finding out how many people are not actually pursuing work that they applied for. Similarly, if someone got denied for doing something that they didn't have a C of A to do, then those are also being re-inspected to see if they have gone through the process of reversing that change. So it's going to be a hard journey, but I think that we're headed in the right direction.
Thank you.
Would ask again if we've got a representative of, thank you for being here today. Thank you, Mr. Dell. Do we have a representative for case number 4 that is attended? What is the proper thing for us to say?
You can take action in the absence of the applicant, or you can continue the item.
I think my recommendation would be to continue this particular item.
I'd move to continue agenda item number 4 to our next meeting.
That would be December the 1st.
I'll second.
Motion and a second. Register your vote. Mr. Allen? Yes. Case number 4. Our final action before we adjourn is to adopt our 2012 calendar year. It's at the end of your packet. Would entertain a motion to do so.
Move to approve. Second.
And one thing I would note is we do overlap in terms of the 2012 calendar. Am I correct? The calendar that we're adopting today also shows January 5th, January 19th, and February 2nd, just like what we had did. We have a motion and a second. Register your vote. It is approved. Do I hear a motion to adjourn?
So moved.
Second. Register your vote. We are adjourned.